The cleaning lady answers a call in Mandarin in front of the millionaire. The next day, she's called to the mansion. Just before we start, this community spans every continent. Drop your city's name if you feel comfortable sharing. The 32nd floor of Sterling Industries hummed with the quiet efficiency of Manhattan's financial elite. Richard Sterling, 45 and weathered by grief, stood at his corner office window watching the October rain streak down the glass. Exactly 13 months ago, his world had shattered when Victoria's car skidded off that icy bridge. 13 months of existing rather than living, of going through the motions while his heart remained frozen in time. Mr. Sterling, the voice, was soft, accented with something he couldn't quite place. He turned to see Sarah Chen, the night cleaning crew supervisor, emptying his wastebasket. At 32, she moved with quiet dignity, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her uniform crisp despite the late hour. That's when Sarah's phone rang. She glanced at Richard apologetically, but when she saw the caller ID, her face went pale. Without hesitation, she answered, "Mama, ni hao ma?" Her voice transformed completely as she spoke rapid Mandarin, worry creeping into her tone. "Shen, Baba Zai Yuan Ma." Richard froze. He'd spent 3 years in Hong Kong early in his career, building Sterling Industries' Asian operations. He understood every word. Her father was in the hospital, emergency surgery. The bills were mounting, and her mother was terrified. Sarah's voice cracked as she spoke. "Mama, wo ming bai, wo hu xiang banfa di. I understand. I'll find a way." She hung up, not noticing Richard had been listening. Her hands trembled as she resumed cleaning, unaware that the man behind the mahogany desk spoke fluent Mandarin and had just overheard her family's crisis. "Sarah," Richard said quietly. She spun around, eyes wide with mortification. "Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry. I know we're not supposed to take personal calls during work hours. Please don't fire me. I need this job, especially now, your father." Richard interrupted gently. "Is he going to be okay?" Sarah's composure cracked. How did you? I lived in Hong Kong for 3 years. Your father needs heart surgery?" Tears she'd been holding back spilled over. "The doctors say it's urgent, but we don't have insurance that covers everything. The deposit alone is $20,000. And she stopped herself, embarrassment flooding her cheeks. "I'm sorry. This isn't your problem." Richard studied her face, seeing something he hadn't encountered in months, genuine emotion, raw and unguarded. In his world of calculated smiles and strategic tears, Sarah's vulnerability struck him like lightning. "What if it could be my problem?" he asked quietly. Sarah stared at him, confused. "I don't understand. Come to my house tomorrow evening, 8 o'clock. I have a proposition for you." "Mr. Sterling, I can't accept charity. It's not charity." Richard pulled out his business card and wrote his home address on the back. "It's an opportunity for both of us." As Sarah took the card with shaking fingers, neither of them realized this moment would change everything. The rain continued its relentless rhythm against the windows, and somewhere in the distance, a clock tower chimed midnight, marking the beginning of something neither could have predicted. Sarah stared at the wrought iron gates of the Sterling Mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. The card trembled in her hand as October wind whipped through the trees, sending golden leaves spiraling around her worn Honda Civic. Richard Sterling's home wasn't just a house. It was a monument to wealth that made her own Queen's apartment look like a showbox. She'd spent the entire day at Mount Sinai Hospital with her parents, watching her father sleep fitfully after his preliminary cardiac workup. Dr. Morrison had been blunt. They had perhaps 2 weeks before his condition became life-threatening. The surgery would cost $85,000. Even with her cleaning job at Sterling Industries and her weekend work at the local grocery store, Sarah couldn't scrape together enough money in time. At exactly 8 o'clock, she pressed the intercom button. "Sarah," Richard's voice crackled through the speaker. "Come up to the main house." The gates swung open silently, revealing a curved driveway lined with perfectly manicured hedges. The mansion itself was breathtaking. 3 stories of Georgian architecture with warm light spilling from every window. Sarah parked next to a black Mercedes and smoothed her best dress, the navy blue one she'd worn to job interviews. Richard opened the door before she could knock. Gone was his business suit. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a white button-down shirt that made him look younger, more approachable. His sandy hair was slightly mussed, and she noticed tired lines around his green eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said, stepping aside to let her in. The foyer took her breath away. A crystal chandelier cast rainbow patterns across marble floors, and an elegant staircase curved toward the second floor. Fresh white roses filled a vase on the entrance table, Victoria's favorite flower, though Sarah couldn't know that. This way, Richard led her through a hallway lined with family photographs. Sarah caught glimpses of a beautiful blonde woman at various ages, always smiling. "Would you like coffee? Wine? I made dinner, if you're hungry." "You cooked?" Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. "Don't sound so shocked. I lived alone for 4 years in college." His smile was the first genuine one she'd seen from him. "Besides, I needed something to keep my hands busy today." They entered a warm kitchen with granite countertops and copper pots hanging from the ceiling. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air, making Sarah's stomach growl despite her nerves sit. Richard gestured to a breakfast nook overlooking the garden. "I made pasta primavera. Victoria used to say I only knew how to make 3 dishes, but I made them well." Sarah noticed how his voice softened when he mentioned his wife. "I heard about Mrs. Sterling. I'm sorry for your loss." 13 months ago, Richard said, serving generous portions. "Car accident on the Merritt Parkway. Black ice." They ate in comfortable silence for several minutes. The pasta was surprisingly good, and Sarah found herself relaxing despite the surreal situation. "You want to know why I asked you here?" Richard finally said. "The thought had crossed my mind. I have a proposition. Your father gets his surgery, all expenses paid, but I need something from you in return." Sarah's fork paused midway to her mouth. "What kind of something?" "Companionship, nothing inappropriate." He added quickly, seeing her expression. "This house has been empty for over a year. I eat dinner alone every night. I go to bed alone. I wake up alone. I'm drowning in silence. You want me to be what exactly? A friend, someone to talk to, someone who understands what it's like to worry about family." Richard's voice grew quieter. "I'll pay for your father's surgery and recovery. In exchange, you have dinner with me 3 times a week. We talk, we eat, maybe watch a movie. Human connection, nothing more." Sarah stared at him. "That's it. Just friendship, that's it. Though I should warn you, I'm not easy company these days. Some nights I barely speak. Others, I might talk too much about Victoria. But I need—" He paused, searching for words. "I need to remember what it feels like to care about someone's day." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Sarah thought about her father's pale face in the hospital bed, about her mother's desperate eyes. "How long?" she asked. 6 months. Your father will be fully recovered by then. And maybe I'll remember how to live again." Sarah looked around the beautiful kitchen, at this broken man offering her family salvation, and wondered what secrets these walls might hold. "I'll do it," she whispered, not knowing she'd just stepped into a story far more complicated than either of them imagined. 3 days later, Sarah returned to the Sterling mansion, carrying a small overnight bag and her heart in her throat. Her father's surgery was scheduled for the following morning. Richard had arranged everything with a single phone call to the hospital's chief of staff. Dr. Morrison himself would perform the procedure, and the finest cardiac unit in New York would handle her father's recovery. "You don't need to bring anything," Richard had told her during their second dinner together. "Victoria's things are still in the guest rooms. You're welcome to anything that fits." Now, standing in the mansion's entry hall again, Sarah felt like an imposter in a museum. "You're early." Richard appeared at the top of the staircase. His tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. "Long day at the office. I couldn't concentrate." Sarah admitted, "Tomorrow is." "He'll be fine. Dr. Morrison has performed this surgery over 300 times. Your father is in the best possible hands." Richard descended the stairs, and Sarah noticed how he moved differently. Here, less rigid than at the office, as if his home stripped away some of the corporate armor. Come on, let me show you round properly this time. He led her through rooms that belonged in architectural magazines, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a music room with a baby grand piano covered in family photos, a sunroom filled with Victoria's beloved orchids that Richard had somehow kept alive. She spent hours here, he said, touching a purple bloom gently, talking to them like they were children. I thought it was silly until after. Now I talk to them too, mostly. I apologize for not being a better gardener. They climbed to the second floor, where Richard paused before a set of double doors. This was our room, he said quietly. I haven't slept here since the accident. I use the study downstairs now. You don't have to show me. I want to. He opened the doors, revealing a master suite that took Sarah's breath away. The room was frozen in time, Victoria's jewelry scattered across the vanity, a half-read romance novel on the nightstand, even her coffee mug sitting exactly where she'd left it. The guest room is across the hall, Richard said, his voice thick. But I thought you should see this, understand why this arrangement helps me. Sarah studied the family photos covering the dresser, Richard and Victoria on their wedding day, both looking impossibly young and radiant, vacation shots from exotic locations, candid moments of pure happiness. How long were you married? Sarah asked softly. 12 years. We met when she was Victoria Hartley, fresh out of Columbia Journalism School. I was 28, working 18-hour days trying to prove myself worthy of inheriting my father's company. Richard picked up a silver frame containing a photo of Victoria laughing on a beach somewhere tropical. She was covering a story about corporate environmental responsibility. I was her target. She was beautiful. She was everything. Smart, funny, passionate about causes that mattered. She made me want to be better than I was. His thumb traced the glass over Victoria's face. We tried for years to have children. 3 miscarriages, 2 failed IVF attempts. The doctors said we should consider adoption. But Victoria wanted to keep trying. She said she could feel our baby waiting for the right moment. Sarah's heart ached for this broken man surrounded by memories he couldn't release. The night she died, we had a fight, Richard continued. Stupid argument about redecorating the nursery again. She stormed out, said she needed air. I was too proud to follow her. His voice cracked. The last thing I said to her was that maybe the doctors were right. Maybe it was time to stop. Hoping, Richard. Sarah reached out instinctively, then stopped herself. She was coming home to apologize when she hit that ice. The police said she died instantly. But I'll always wonder if her last thought was anger at me. Thunder crashed outside, and rain began pelting the windows. Richard carefully placed the photo back on the dresser, his hands shaking slightly. I need you to understand what you're walking into, he said. This isn't just about loneliness, it's about learning to live with the weight of what-ifs and might-have-beens. Some days I'm fine, others, I can barely function. But when you answered that phone call in Mandarin, when I saw you fighting for your family, he looked at her directly for the first time. It reminded me that life still happens to other people, that love still exists, even if mine is gone. Sarah felt tears on her cheeks. Outside, the storm grew stronger, as if the universe itself was mourning with them. Your father's surgery is at 7 a.m., Richard said, composing himself. I'll drive you to the hospital. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Because somewhere along the way, your family's happiness has become important to me, and I haven't cared about anything in 13 months. As Sarah settled into the guest room that night, listening to rain against unfamiliar windows, she wondered what she'd truly agreed to. This wasn't just about her father's surgery anymore. Somehow, she'd become responsible for helping Richard Sterling remember how to live. But what she didn't know was that Victoria's death held secrets that would soon surface. Secrets that would change everything Sarah thought she understood about the man sleeping 2 doors away. 2 weeks later, Sarah's father was recovering beautifully, his color returning and strength building daily. True to their agreement, she'd had dinner at the Sterling mansion 6 times, and each evening revealed new layers to Richard's carefully guarded grief. Tonight was different. Richard seemed agitated as he served wine in the library, his usual careful composure cracking around the edges. Tell me about your family, he said abruptly, settling into the leather chair across from her. your real story, not just the emergency room version. Sarah curled her legs beneath her on the sofa, holding her wine glass like armor. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with why a woman with your education is cleaning office buildings at midnight. Sarah smiled. Ruefully, you've been investigating me? I had to know who I was trusting with my grief. Richard's green eyes were intense in the firelight. Master's degree in international business from NYU. Fluent in Mandarin, Cantonese, and Spanish. You're overqualified to empty waste baskets. Life has a way of humbling your expectations, Sarah said quietly. I came here from San Francisco 5 years ago. My parents followed me east when my father's construction company folded during the recession. I thought I'd land a corporate position easily with my credentials. What happened? The economy happened. The job market happened. Being an Asian woman in finance happened. Sarah's voice carried old frustration. I sent out hundreds of resumes. Made it to final interviews more times than I can count. Always came in second. The feedback was always the same. Impressive qualifications. But they went with someone who was a better cultural fit. Richard winced. I'm sorry. That's racist. Yes, it was. But subtle enough that I couldn't prove anything. Sarah sipped. Her wine, old pain surfacing. After 2 years, my savings were gone. I took the cleaning job to pay rent while I kept searching. 1 year became 2, then 3. Eventually, you stop believing anyone will take you seriously. But you never stopped learning Mandarin. My grandmother insisted. She immigrated here in 1962 with nothing but determination. And broken English. She worked in sweatshops for 40 years so my mother could go to college when I was little. She'd tell me stories about Shanghai in the 1940s, about losing everything and starting over. Sarah's eyes grew distant. She made me promise to never forget where we came from, no matter how American I became. She sounds remarkable. She was. Cancer took her 6 years ago, but her voice is still in my head, telling me to stand up straight and speak clearly. Sarah laughed softly. She would have loved seeing me in this house, sharing wine with a Fortune 500 CEO. She always said America rewards those who wait for the right opportunity. Richard set down his glass and leaned forward. What if the right opportunity is now? What if this arrangement is about more than just your father's surgery? What do you mean? Sterling Industries is expanding into Asian markets again. We need someone who understands both cultures, someone with business credentials and language skills, someone I trust. Sarah's heart began racing. Richard, you can't offer me a job just because you feel grateful. This isn't gratitude. His voice was firm. I've been watching you, Sarah. The way you handled your family's crisis with dignity. How you've listened to my grief without judgment. You're exactly what my company needs, and more importantly, what I need. As my special assistant for international development, you'd handle all our Chinese partnerships, travel to Hong Kong and Shanghai, negotiate contracts worth millions. Starting salary is $150,000 plus bonuses. Sarah stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. Richard, that's more than I ever imagined making. You're worth it. You've always been worth it. The system failed you, not the other way around. Outside, autumn wind rattled the windows. Sarah thought about her tiny Queens apartment, about years of rejection letters, about her father's grateful smile when Dr. Morrison said the surgery was completely successful. There's something else, Richard said quietly. Part of the position would require entertaining clients, attending corporate functions. Some of those events, I'd need you as my companion. Nothing romantic, he added quickly. But the business world expects certain appearances. A man my age, in my position, attending functions alone raises questions about stability. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend. I want you to be my friend, professionally and personally. If others assume more, that's their conclusion to draw. Sarah felt the weight of possibility settling around her like Victoria's expensive perfume. That still lingered in the guest room. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course. But Sarah, Richard stood and moved to the window, staring out at his perfectly manicured garden. I haven't felt hope about anything in 13 months. You've given me that. Whatever you decide about the job, these dinners, these conversations, They've saved my life. As Sarah drove home through Manhattan's glittering streets that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that accepting Richard's offer would change everything. What she didn't know was that across town, someone else was watching their growing friendship with very different intentions. Someone who knew exactly why Victoria Sterling had really died that night. On the Merritt Parkway, Sarah accepted the position. On a crisp November morning, exactly 1 month after her father's successful surgery, Richard's smile when she called was the brightest thing she'd seen in his eyes since they'd met. Her first day at Sterling Industries was surreal. Instead of entering through the service elevator with cleaning supplies, she rode up to the executive floor in a tailored navy suit Richard had insisted on buying her. The 34th floor buzzed with the energy of high-stakes decision-making, and Sarah felt both terrified and exhilarated. "Miss Chen?" A sharp-faced woman in her 50s approached with an armload of files. "I'm Margaret Winters, Mr. Sterling's executive assistant. He's asked me to get you oriented." Margaret's tone was cordial but cool, and Sarah sensed immediate disapproval. Beneath the professional courtesy, "These are the current Asian market reports," Margaret continued, leading Sarah to a spacious office with windows overlooking Central Park. "Your predecessor, James Morrison, handled these accounts for 8 years. Before his retirement, he left detailed notes on all our Chinese partners." "This is incredible," Sarah breathed, taking in the office that was larger than her entire apartment. "Mr. Sterling has high expectations," Margaret said crisply. "Our Shanghai office generates 40% of company revenue. There's no room for errors in this position." The warning was clear, and Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "I understand, do you? Because frankly, Miss Chen, your rapid promotion has raised eyebrows throughout the company. Moving from custodial services to international development in a matter of weeks is unprecedented." Sarah met Margaret's challenging gaze directly. "I'm qualified for this position, Mrs. Winters. My education and language skills, of course they are." Margaret's smile was razor-thin. "I'm simply sharing the office perspective. People talk, Miss Chen. They wonder about the nature of your relationship with Mr. Sterling, especially given his recent personal losses." Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. "My relationship with Mr. Sterling is purely professional. I'm sure it is. But appearances matter in this business. Mr. Sterling's judgment has been questionable since Mrs. Sterling's death. Some board members worry he's not thinking clearly." Before Sarah could respond, Richard appeared in the doorway. "Margaret, thank you for getting Sarah settled. Could you give us a moment?" Margaret's demeanor shifted instantly to deferential professionalism. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. Miss Chen, I've left the Hong Kong contract files on your desk for review." After Margaret left, Richard closed the door and turned to Sarah with concerned eyes. "What did she say to you?" "Nothing important. Just explaining expectations, Sarah." Richard's voice was gentle but firm. "I saw your face when I walked in. Margaret can be protective of company interests sometimes. If she was inappropriate, she thinks people are gossiping about us, about why you really promoted me." Richard sank into the chair across from Sarah's desk, suddenly looking older than his 45 years. "I was afraid of this. In my grief, I forgot how cruel corporate politics can be. I should have anticipated." "Richard, it's fine. I can handle office gossip. It's not fine." His voice hardened. "You earned this position. Your qualifications speak for themselves. Anyone suggesting otherwise will answer to me. That's exactly what they're worried about. You defending me too quickly, too personally." Richard was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. "Victoria used to say I was terrible at hiding my feelings. She could read every emotion on my face before I knew I was feeling it. What are you feeling now?" "Protective. Angry that you're being questioned when you've done nothing wrong." And he paused, as if surprised by his own revelation. "Happy, for the first time in 13 months. I'm excited about something. About working with you. About seeing you succeed." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "Richard, I know it's complicated. I know people will talk. But Sarah, you've brought light back into my life when I thought I'd live in darkness forever. I won't apologize for that, and I won't let anyone make you pay for it." That evening, their dinner at the mansion felt different. The professional boundary lines were blurring, and both of them felt it. Richard had opened a bottle of champagne to celebrate Sarah's first day, and the alcohol loosened inhibitions that had been carefully maintained. To new beginnings, Richard raised his glass. To unlikely partnerships, Sarah replied, clinking her glass against his. As they sat in the library afterward, Sarah noticed Richard watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "What?" she asked. "You're remarkable, Sarah Chen. I hope you know that." Richard. Sarah felt the air thicken between them. "We agreed this was just friendship. I know what we agreed." His voice was quiet, almost whispered. "But feelings don't follow agreements, do they?" Before either could say more, Richard's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. "Detective Morrison, NYPD. Why would?" He answered cautiously. "This is Richard Sterling." Sarah watched his face drain of color as he listened to the voice on the other end. "What do you mean, new evidence? Victoria's case was closed over a year ago." Richard's hand gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles went white. "I don't understand. What kind of evidence?" Sarah felt ice settle in her stomach as she watched Richard's world begin to crack open again. "Tomorrow at 10. Yes, I'll be there." Richard hung up, staring at the phone as if it were a weapon. "Richard, what's wrong?" He looked up at her with haunted eyes. "They're reopening Victoria's case. Someone came forward with information suggesting her death wasn't an accident." The champagne glasses sat forgotten on the table, as Sarah realized their carefully constructed new beginning was about to collide with secrets from Richard's past that someone had been waiting 13 months to reveal. The police station felt like a tomb as Richard and Sarah sat in Detective Morrison's cramped office the next morning. Sarah had insisted on coming despite Richard's protests, and now she watched her employer, her friend, slowly disintegrate as Detective Morrison opened a manila folder filled with photographs and documents. "Mr. Sterling, I know this is difficult," Detective Morrison began, his weathered face kind but determined. "We reopened your wife's case yesterday after receiving new information from an anonymous source." "What kind of information?" Richard's voice was barely controlled. Detective Morrison slid a photograph across the desk. "Security camera footage from a gas station 2 miles from the accident site. Our technicians enhanced the image quality using new software." Sarah leaned forward to see the photo and felt her blood run cold. It showed Victoria's silver Mercedes at a gas pump, but she wasn't alone. A man in a dark coat was standing by the driver's side window, leaning in as if talking to her. This was taken at 9:47 p.m. the night of the accident. Morrison continued. "The accident occurred at 10:15 p.m. Mrs. Sterling purchased gas at 9:50 p.m., which means this conversation happened just minutes before she died." Richard stared at the photo, his face ashen. "I don't recognize him. Who is he? We're working on identification." "But Mr. Sterling, there's more." Morrison hesitated. The anonymous tip came with additional information. Allegations about Mrs. Sterling's activities in the months before her death. "What kind of allegations?" Sarah asked when Richard seemed unable to speak. "Financial irregularities, large cash withdrawals from her personal account, secret meetings." "The tipster claims Mrs. Sterling was involved in something that got her killed." "That's impossible." Richard's voice cracked. Victoria was writing a freelance piece about urban development. Her biggest concern was what color to paint the nursery. She wasn't involved in anything dangerous. Detective Morrison opened another file. "Mr. Sterling, were you aware that your wife withdrew $50,000 in cash from her account over a 6-week period before her death?" Richard stared at him blankly. 50,000. "No, that's..." "We shared everything. She would have told me about large withdrawals. The bank records show multiple transactions, always cash, always in amounts just under the reporting threshold. Very deliberate pattern." Sarah watched Richard crumble before her eyes. Everything he thought he knew about his wife, about their marriage, about that terrible night was being systematically destroyed. There has to be an explanation. Richard whispered. "Victoria wasn't secretive. We told each other everything." "Mr. Sterling," Morrison's voice was gentle. "In my experience, The people closest to us are often the ones with the most secrets to hide. Your wife may have been protecting you from something dangerous, or someone was forcing her," Sarah interjected, thinking of her own family's vulnerabilities. If someone threatened her or threatened Richard, she might have paid to keep him safe. Morrison nodded approvingly at Sarah. "That's a possibility we're exploring, Mr. Sterling. I need you to think carefully. In the months before Victoria's death, did she seem anxious? Did she mention any problems with sources for her articles, any strange phone calls or meetings?" Richard closed his eyes, forcing himself to remember. "She was distracted sometimes. Said she was working on a big story that could change everything. But she always talked about her work. I thought it was just—" He stopped, realization dawning. She stopped talking about her work. Usually she'd tell me every detail, but the last few months, she just said it was complicated. Did she mention any names, locations, anything that seemed unusual? She mentioned Chinatown a few times, said she was meeting sources there for research. And Richard's eyes flew open. She asked me about offshore banking procedures, said it was for her article, but she seemed nervous when she brought it up. Detective Morrison made notes. "We'll need to examine Mrs. Sterling's computer, her files, anything related to her final article. Do you still have her research materials, everything's exactly as she left it? I couldn't bear to touch her study, Mr. Sterling. I have to ask, did you know your wife had been in contact with James Chen in the weeks before her death?" Sarah felt the world tilt sideways. "James Chen, that's my father's name." Morrison looked surprised. "Your father? How do you know Mr. Sterling?" "I work for him now," Sarah said faintly. "But my father's been sick, heart surgery. He couldn't have been meeting with anyone about business, not business meetings." Morrison clarified. "According to phone records, Mrs. Sterling called your father's number 17 times in the month before she died. The last call was 3 hours before the accident." Sarah and Richard stared at each other in shocked silence. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered. "My father would have told me if he'd spoken to Mrs. Sterling. They didn't know each other." "Mr. Sterling," Morrison continued relentlessly, "given this connection, I have to ask, when exactly did you meet Miss Chen?" "The night of Victoria's anniversary," Richard said slowly, his face pale with dawning realization. "October 13th. She was cleaning my office when her phone rang. And you hired her how long after that?" Richard looked at Sarah with growing horror. "Sarah, this can't be a coincidence. Your father, Victoria's phone calls, you appearing in my life exactly 1 year after her death." Sarah felt sick. Everything she thought she knew about her new life was crumbling around her. "Detective Morrison," she said with shaking voice, "I need to speak to my father immediately. Because if he was talking to Victoria Sterling before she died, then my family is connected to whatever got her killed." Outside the police station, autumn winds scattered dead leaves across the parking lot like secrets finally coming to light. And somewhere in the city, the person who had waited 13 months to destroy Richard Sterling's carefully rebuilt world was watching the news unfold with satisfaction. Knowing that the real revelation was still to come, Sarah burst through the doors of Mount Sinai Hospital with Richard close behind her, their footsteps echoing through sterile corridors that now felt ominous rather than hopeful. Her father was in his room, reading a Chinese newspaper and looking healthier than he had in months. The color had returned to his cheeks, and his smile was bright when he saw them enter. "Sarah and Mr. Sterling." James Chen struggled to sit up. "Straighter, you didn't need to visit again. The nurses say I can go home tomorrow." "Baba," Sarah said in Mandarin, her voice tight with emotion. "We need to talk about Victoria Sterling." James's face went white. The newspaper slipped from his hands, fluttering to the floor like a wounded bird. "Sarah, I don't know what you mean," he said in English, but his eyes betrayed him. "The police have phone records, Baba, 17 calls from Victoria Sterling in the month before she died, the last one 3 hours before her accident." Sarah sat on the edge of his bed, taking his weathered hands in hers. "Tell me the truth. How did you know Richard's wife?" James looked between Sarah and Richard, his internal struggle visible on his face. After a long moment, he sighed deeply. "I was hoping this day would never come," he said quietly. "Victoria Sterling saved our family, Sarah. But it cost her everything. Richard moved closer, his face pale. What do you mean she saved your family? 2 years ago, when my construction company failed, we owed money to the wrong people. Not just banks, private lenders, dangerous men who don't accept bankruptcy as an excuse. James's voice shook with the memory. They came to our apartment, threatened Sarah, threatened her mother, said we had 2 weeks to pay or they would collect in other ways. Sarah felt ice in her veins. Baba, you never told me. How could I tell my daughter I had borrowed money from criminals? That my failure put her in danger? James's eyes filled. With tears, I was desperate, ashamed. I didn't know what to do. How did Victoria find out? Richard asked, his voice barely controlled. She was working on a story about predatory lending in immigrant communities. Someone gave her our name as an example of a family being destroyed by loan sharks. She came to interview us. James looked at Richard with profound sadness. Your wife was a remarkable woman. Mr. Sterling, she listened to our story and immediately understood the danger we were in. What did she do? Sarah whispered. She paid them, all of it. $85,000 to make the debt disappear completely. James's voice cracked. But she made me promise never to tell anyone, especially not you, Sarah. She said it would put you all in danger if the wrong people knew. Richard staggered backward as if physically struck. $85,000, that's where the money went. Victoria was protecting your family. She saved our lives, James continued. But Mr. Sterling, your wife was investigating something much bigger than predatory lending. She told me she had discovered connections between the loan sharks and major real estate development projects, corrupt politicians, money laundering, murder. She said she was close to exposing a network that went all the way to City Hall. Sarah's mind reeled. The phone calls before she died. She was scared. Said someone had figured out she was investigating them. She called me because she trusted me and because she wanted to make sure our family stayed safe if something happened to her. James gripped Sarah's hands tighter. The last time she called, the night she died, she was crying. She said she had proof of everything, but she didn't know who she could trust with it. What proof? Richard demanded. Documents, photographs, recordings. She said she had hidden everything somewhere safe, but she wouldn't tell me where. She was afraid if they caught her, they would force her to reveal the location. Richard slumped into the visitor's chair, his world reshaping itself around this new truth. Victoria died because she was trying to protect people, your family, other families like yours. Mr. Sterling, James said quietly, there's something else. Victoria made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would watch over Sarah. She said Sarah was special, that she reminded her of herself at that age. Smart, determined, willing to fight for what's right. Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She knew about me before we ever met. She had been watching you for months. She knew about your education, your struggles to find work, your character. She said if something happened to her, Sarah would need protection too, because the people who killed her wouldn't stop looking for what she had hidden. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of medical monitors. Outside, November rain began tapping against the windows like fingers drumming impatiently. The night I answered the phone in Mandarin, Sarah said slowly, understanding dawning. You called me at exactly the right time, didn't you? When you knew Richard would be in his office late. James nodded reluctantly. Victoria had told me about Mr. Sterling's late nights, his grief, his isolation. She made me promise to bring you two together if something happened to her. She said he would need someone like you, and you would need his protection. Richard stood abruptly, pacing to the window. So none of this was coincidence. Sarah's job, our friendship, everything. It was all Victoria's plan from beyond the grave. Not all of it, James said firmly. Victoria brought you together. But everything that's happened between you, that's real. She couldn't plan for feelings. Mr. Sterling, she could only create the opportunity. Sarah felt her heart breaking. For Richard, watching him grapple with the knowledge that even his healing had been orchestrated by his dead wife. Richard, she said softly, does it matter how we met if what we've found together is real? He turned from the window, his green eyes bright with unshed tears. I don't know what's real anymore, Sarah. My wife was living a double life. fighting battles I knew nothing about. She died protecting people I'd never met. And somehow, even in death, she's still trying to take care of me. Because she loved you. Sarah said simply. Everything she did was because she loved you. James struggled to sit up straighter. Mr. Sterling, Victoria made me promise one more thing. She said if her killers ever came looking for what she hid, I should tell you to remember where you first said you loved her. She said you would know what that meant. Richard's face went completely white. She told you that. Those exact words. Yes, do you know what she meant? Richard was already moving toward the door. I know exactly what she meant. And if I'm right, Victoria left us more than just proof of who killed her. She left us the keys to destroy them completely. As they rushed out of the hospital into the storm, none of them noticed the black sedan following at a careful distance, or the man inside making urgent phone calls to people who had been waiting 13 months for this moment to arrive. The Sterling mansion felt different as Richard led Sarah through rooms that had become both sanctuary and mausoleum. It was past midnight, but neither could sleep after James Chen's revelations. Richard moved with purpose now, his grief transformed into something harder and more dangerous. Where you first said you loved her, Sarah repeated as they climbed the grand staircase. Do you know what she meant? The music room, Richard said without hesitation. 3 months after we started dating, I found her playing piano at 2 in the morning. She was working on a story about child trafficking, couldn't sleep because of what she'd learned. I sat with her while she played, and when she finished, he paused at the music room door. I told her I loved her for the first time. The music room was exactly as Sarah remembered from her tour. Baby grand piano, family photographs, the lingering scent of Victoria's perfume. But now Richard was looking at it with new eyes, searching for something specific. She was always hiding things in plain sight, Richard murmured, walking to the piano bench. Said the best hiding places were the ones people looked at every day without really seeing. He lifted the bench seat, revealing sheet music stored inside. But instead of pulling out music, he ran his fingers along the interior edges until he found a small button. When pressed, a section of the bottom lifted away, revealing a hidden compartment. My God, Sarah breathed as Richard pulled out a thick manila envelope. Victoria had this built when we renovated 5 years ago. Said every good journalist needed a place to hide sources and evidence. Richard's hands shook as he opened the envelope. I thought it was paranoia. Turns out it was preparation. The envelope contained dozens of photographs, financial documents, and what appeared to be transcripts of recorded conversations. Sarah picked up one of the photos and felt sick. It showed the man from the gas station security footage, but this time he was clearly visible, shaking hands with someone she recognized. Richard, this man. I've seen him before. Where? He came to the office last week. Said he was from the mayor's office, reviewing our building permits for the new Shanghai project. Richard grabbed the photo, studying it intently. David Morrison. He's Deputy Director of Urban Development. Victoria was investigating corruption in the permit process. Morrison. Like Detective Morrison? Different Morrison, but Sarah. Richard's face went pale as he read one of the transcripts. Look at this. It's a recorded conversation between David Morrison and someone identified only as the coordinator. They're discussing Victoria by name. Sarah read over his shoulder, her blood chilling with each line. The journalist is getting too close. She has documents linking our permits to the Chen family situation. Can we discredit her? Not easily. Sterling's wife has too much credibility. We need a permanent solution. Make it look accidental. And Morrison? Make sure it happens after she's told us where she hid the evidence. They killed her for this, Sarah whispered. They murdered Victoria to cover up corruption. Richard continued rifling through documents, his face growing darker with each revelation. Sarah, this goes deeper than corruption. Look at these financial records. They weren't just taking bribes for permits. They were laundering money through fake construction projects. Millions of dollars, including money from the loan sharks who threatened my family. Exactly. Your father's debt wasn't random. They targeted immigrant families specifically because they were less likely to report crimes or fight back. Richard held up a bank statement. Look at this account. David Morrison has been moving money from predatory lending operations into legitimate real estate developments, taking a percentage for himself. Sarah studied the documents spread across the piano bench. Victoria uncovered an entire criminal network. Politicians, developers, loan sharks, all connected. And they killed her for it. Richard's voice was cold with fury, but they made one mistake. They thought they could intimidate her into revealing where she hid the evidence before they killed her. She died protecting this information. Richard, if this is true, then we're in danger too. If they find out we have Victoria's evidence. A sound from downstairs made them both freeze. The soft click of the front door opening. Footsteps on marble floors. Stay here, Richard whispered, moving toward the music room door. Don't be ridiculous. We stay together. They crept to the top of the staircase and peered down into the foyer. 3 men in dark coats were examining the alarm system panel. Sarah recognized one immediately, David Morrison, the man who'd visited Sterling Industries claiming to be from the mayor's office. How did they find us so fast? Sarah breathed. They've probably been watching the hospital, Richard replied, grimly, waiting for us to lead them to Victoria's evidence. One of the men looked up toward the second floor. Check upstairs. Sterling's car is in the driveway, so he's here somewhere. Richard grabbed Sarah's hand and pulled her back toward the music room, the safe room. Victoria insisted we build it after her first death. Threat, it's behind the bookshelf in my study. They moved silently down the hallway, but the house's old floors creaked under their feet. Shouts came from below as the intruders realized they'd been detected. Upstairs. Now. Richard fumbled with the hidden mechanism behind his desk as heavy footsteps thundered up the staircase. The bookshelf swung open, revealing a small, reinforced room with communication equipment and emergency supplies. Get in, Richard urged, shoving Victoria's evidence into Sarah's hands. There's a phone that connects directly to FBI emergency services. Call them and tell them we have evidence in the Victoria Sterling murder case. What about you? I'm going to buy us time. Richard pulled a pistol from his desk drawer. Victoria made me learn to shoot after her second death threat. Turns out she was preparing for exactly this scenario. Sarah grabbed his arm. Richard, no, don't be a hero. Come in the safe room with me, Sarah. Listen to me. Richard's eyes were intense, desperate. Victoria died protecting this evidence and your family. I won't let her sacrifice be meaningless. If something happens to me, promise me you'll make sure these bastards pay for what they did. Before Sarah could protest, Richard kissed her, desperate, passionate, and full of everything they'd been holding back. I love you, Sarah Chen. He whispered against her lips, and that's not Victoria's plan talking. That's me, choosing to live again because of you. The safe room door closed between them just as David Morrison's voice echoed through the study. Mr. Sterling, we know you're here. Let's discuss this like civilized people. Through the hidden cameras in the safe room, Sarah watched Richard face down 3 armed killers with nothing but Victoria's gun and 13 months of buried rage, while she dialed the FBI and prayed they would arrive in time to save the man she'd fallen in love with against all odds. The FBI arrived with sirens blazing and tactical lights cutting through the November darkness. But Sarah's heart didn't stop racing until she saw Richard walk out of the mansion unharmed. David Morrison and his associates had fled when they heard the approaching sirens, leaving behind evidence of their break-in, but escaping into the night. They'll be back. Special Agent Linda Rodriguez warned as she examined Victoria's hidden documents in the music room. This evidence could bring down half the city's development authority. Men like Morrison don't give up easily. Then what do we do? Sarah asked, exhaustion making her voice shake. It was nearly dawn, and she felt like she'd lived a lifetime in the past 24 hours. Witness protection, Agent Rodriguez said matter-of-factly. Both of you, until we can round up everyone involved in this network. Absolutely not, Richard said firmly. I won't hide from these bastards. Victoria died fighting them. I'm going to finish what she started. Mr. Sterling, with respect, your wife was a trained investigative journalist who knew how to handle dangerous situations. You're a businessman. These people have already killed once to protect their secrets. Sarah looked between Richard and the FBI agent, her mind racing. What if there was another way? What if we could force them to come to us on our terms? Agent Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? They don't know exactly what evidence we have. They broke in here looking for it, which means they're desperate. What if we let them think they can make a deal? That's incredibly dangerous. Agent Rodriguez warned. So is hiding for months while they pick off witnesses one by one. Sarah replied, these men killed Victoria because she was close to exposing them, but we have the actual evidence. We have the power now. Richard studied Sarah's face. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Victoria was brilliant. She didn't just gather evidence. She gathered leverage. Look at these financial records. If we threaten to release them, we're not just threatening Morrison. We're threatening everyone who's profited from this corruption network. Agent Rodriguez picked up one of the bank statements. You're talking about going public. The media. Better than that, Sarah said, pieces of a plan forming in her mind. Richard, you still have connections in Hong Kong, right? International banking oversight. Yes, but I don't see how. These accounts show money laundering through overseas investments. If we report this to international banking authorities, we're not just threatening local corruption. We're threatening their entire operation. Agent Rodriguez looked impressed despite herself. That could work. International banking fraud gets federal jurisdiction automatically. Much harder for local corruption to interfere. But it also means painting an even bigger target on our backs, Richard pointed out. Sarah took his hands, looking directly into his tired green eyes. Richard, Victoria spent her last months living in fear, trying to protect people she'd never met because it was the right thing to do. She died alone in that car because she couldn't trust anyone with what she knew. But we're not alone. We have each other. We have the FBI, and we have the evidence she died to protect. Sarah's right. Agent Rodriguez added, if we coordinate with international authorities, we can move fast enough to arrest the major players before they can retaliate. But we need your full cooperation, and we need you to trust us completely. Richard was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the morning sun rising over his perfectly manicured gardens. Victoria used to say that the only way to honor the dead was to finish what they started. So we finish it, Sarah said simply. Together, Richard agreed. But Sarah, if we do this, there's no going back. These people will never stop hunting us. Then, we make sure they're all in prison before they get the chance. Agent Rodriguez stood and gathered the evidence into secure briefcases. I'll need both of you in protective custody while we coordinate with international authorities. We're talking about maybe 72 hours to arrest everyone simultaneously. Where? Richard asked. FBI safe house in Connecticut. Isolated, secure, round-the-clock protection. Agent Rodriguez paused. Mr. Sterling, I should warn you. We'll need complete access to Sterling Industries' financial records. To verify the connections in these documents, your company will be under federal scrutiny. If my company is connected to this corruption, then it deserves scrutiny, Richard said firmly. I'd rather lose everything than let Victoria's killers go free. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself in an unmarked FBI vehicle, watching the Sterling mansion disappear behind autumn trees. Next to her, Richard was making phone calls to his lawyers and board members, explaining why Sterling Industries' CEO would be unavailable for the next few days. Scared? He asked when he finished his calls. Terrified, Sarah admitted, but also hopeful. For the first time since this all started, it feels like we're fighting back instead of just reacting. Victoria would be proud of you, of both of us. Sarah squeezed his hand. Richard, what happens after? Assuming we survive this and Morrison's network gets arrested, what happens to us? Richard was quiet for a moment. I don't know. Everything between us started because of Victoria's plan. Once this is over, once justice is done, I'm not sure what's left. We could find out, Sarah said softly. If you want to. I want to. Richard replied, bringing her hand to his lips. God help me. I want to find out what we could be when we're not running for our lives. As their FBI escort wound through Connecticut backroads toward an uncertain future, neither Sarah nor Richard noticed the helicopter tracking their route from a careful distance. or the encrypted phone calls being made to men who had decided that some evidence was too dangerous to let reach federal prosecutors, no matter who had to die to stop it. The war Victoria Sterling had started with her investigation was about to reach its final, desperate battle. The FBI safe house sat like a fortress in the Connecticut woods, its windows bulletproof and its perimeter monitored by agents who spoke in code and moved like shadows. Sarah had been there 36 hours when Agent Rodriguez burst through the door with news that changed everything. "We have a problem," Rodriguez announced, her face grim. "David Morrison is dead." Richard looked up from the financial documents he'd been reviewing. "Dead how?" "Apparent suicide. Found in his apartment this morning with a note confessing to corruption, but claiming Victoria Sterling's death was an accident. Says he was being blackmailed by foreign criminals and couldn't live with the shame." Sarah felt ice in her stomach. "That's convenient. Too convenient. The handwriting analysis will take days, but our psychological profile suggests Morrison wasn't the type for suicide. He was a narcissist who believed he could talk his way out of anything. So they killed him to tie up loose ends," Richard said. Grimly, "It gets worse. Morrison's death made the morning news. Now every corrupt official in the city knows we're close to exposing them. They're going to move fast to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses." Agent Rodriguez spread crime scene photos across the table. "Look at this. Morrison's apartment was searched thoroughly before the police arrived. Someone was looking for something specific." Sarah studied the photos. They were looking for the rest of Victoria's evidence. Morrison must have had other documents, recordings maybe, which means our evidence isn't complete, Richard realized. Victoria must have hidden things in multiple locations. Agent Rodriguez nodded. "That's what we think. And now Morrison's associates know we don't have everything. They're going to assume we can be stopped before we go public." "How much time do we have before the international banking authorities act?" Sarah asked. 12 hours. "But Sarah, if they attack this safe house, they won't attack," Richard interrupted, something clicking in his mind. "They'll offer a trade," as if summoned by his words. Agent Rodriguez's phone rang. She listened for a moment, her face growing pale. "Put him through," she said, activating the speaker phone. "Mr. Sterling?" The voice was smooth, confident, with a slight accent Sarah couldn't place. "My name is Vincent Crusoe. I believe you have something that belongs to my associates." "I have evidence of crimes," Richard replied coldly. "If that belongs to your associates, then your associates are criminals." Crusoe chuckled. "Such moral clarity. Your wife had the same problem. It made her very difficult to negotiate with." Sarah grabbed Richard's arm as his face went white with rage. "You killed Victoria," Richard said, his voice deadly quiet. "Your wife killed herself, Mr. Sterling. We offered her a very generous settlement for her silence. She chose to be heroic instead. Heroes tend to die young. What do you want?" Agent Rodriguez interjected. "Simple trade, Agent Rodriguez. Mr. Sterling and Miss Chen return all of Victoria Sterling's research materials, and we allow them to live quietly. They refuse, and they join Mrs. Sterling in the afterlife. We don't negotiate with terrorists," Rodriguez said firmly. "Oh, but you will." Crusoe's voice turned cold. "Because we have something you want, or rather, someone. James Chen is no longer in Mount Sinai Hospital. He's our guest now, and his health depends entirely on his daughter's cooperation." Sarah's world tilted sideways. "You bastard. He just had heart surgery, which makes him quite fragile, doesn't it? One phone call from me, and his recovery takes a tragic turn for the worse." Richard was already standing, pacing like a caged animal. "Where do you want to meet?" "Richard." "No," Agent Rodriguez warned. "This is exactly what they want. They have Sarah's father, an innocent man who only got involved because he was trying to protect his family. Mr. Sterling understands the situation." Crusoe continued smoothly. "Pier 47, Brooklyn. 1 hour. Bring all of Victoria's materials. Come alone or James Chen dies." "We'll be there," Richard said before Agent Rodriguez could stop him. "We?" Crusoe's voice sharpened. "I said alone. Sarah comes with me, or no deal. You want Victoria's evidence. You negotiate with both of us." There was a long pause. "Very well. But Mr. Sterling, Any sign of federal agents and your friend James suffers for it." The line went dead. Agent Rodriguez was already on her radio, coordinating with tactical teams. "We can have snipers in position. Backup units." "No," Sarah said firmly. "He's right about my father being fragile. Any stress could kill him as surely as a bullet." "Sarah, this is suicide. Even if they let your father go, they'll never let you and Richard walk away." "Maybe not, but Agent Rodriguez, we know something." "They don't." "What?" Sarah pulled out her phone and showed them a text message from an unknown number. "I've been getting these all morning. Someone's been trying to contact us." The message read, "I have the rest of Victoria's evidence." Morrison wasn't the only one she trusted. "Pier 47 tonight. I'll be watching. Trust me, a friend." Richard stared at the phone. "Someone else knows about Victoria's investigation." "Someone Morrison's people don't know about," Sarah added. "Someone who's been waiting for the right moment to come forward." Agent Rodriguez studied the message. "This could be a trap." "Everything's a trap now," Richard said grimly. "But Sarah's right. We can't save her father by hiding. And we can't honor Victoria's sacrifice by letting her killers win. If we're doing this, we're doing it smart," Sarah said, her mind racing with possibilities. "Agent Rodriguez, how long would it take to get unmarked surveillance in place around Pier 47? 20 minutes. But if they spot federal agents, they won't be looking for agents. They'll be looking for us." Sarah turned to Richard. "What if we give them exactly what they expect to see?" As Sarah outlined her plan, Agent Rodriguez's expression shifted from concern to grudging admiration. It was risky, potentially deadly, but it might be their only chance to save James Chen and bring Victoria's killers to justice. In 90 minutes, they would walk into a trap that had been 13 months in the making. But this time, they wouldn't be walking in blind, and they wouldn't be walking in alone. Victoria Sterling's final battle was about to begin. Pier 47 stretched into Brooklyn's dark harbor like a concrete finger pointing toward oblivion. Sarah stood next to Richard at the edge of the dock, briefcase containing Victoria's evidence at their feet, watching shadows move between shipping containers in the distance. The November wind cut through her jacket, but she couldn't tell if she was shivering from cold or terror. 3 minutes late, Richard murmured, checking his watch. "Think they're coming. They're here," Sarah replied, nodding toward the black SUV that had just pulled into the parking area. "They've been watching us for 10 minutes. 3 men emerged from the vehicle, and Sarah recognized David Morrison's companions from the mansion break-in. The man in the center was new, tall, silver-haired, expensively dressed despite the industrial setting. Vincent Crusoe in person was more intimidating than his voice had suggested. "Mr. Sterling, Miss Chen," Crusoe called as his group approached. "Punctual. I appreciate that in business partners." "Where's my father?" Sarah demanded. Crusoe smiled and gestured toward the nearest shipping container. "Safe and comfortable, though I must say his cardiovascular health is quite precarious. The stress of his current situation has been challenging for him. Let us see him," Richard said firmly. "Of course, but first, let's verify that you've brought what we discussed." Sarah opened the briefcase, revealing folders, photographs, and recording devices. Crusoe's eyes lit up with satisfaction. "Excellent. Your wife was quite thorough, Mr. Sterling. It's a shame she chose martyrdom over cooperation." "Victoria was twice the person you'll ever be," Richard replied coldly. "Perhaps, but she's dead, and I'm not. That's the only success metric that matters in this business." Crusoe nodded to one of his men, who used a crowbar to open the shipping container. James Chen stumbled out, pale and breathing heavily but alive. Sarah started toward him, but Crusoe's other associate drew a gun. "Not yet, Miss Chen. Business first. The evidence for my father. That was the deal. Almost. First, we need to discuss your futures. You see, this evidence could be problematic if it surfaced elsewhere. We need your word that this is everything Victoria Sterling gathered." Sarah and Richard exchanged glances. This was the moment they'd planned for. "It's everything we found," Sarah said truthfully. "Excellent. Now, about ensuring your continued silence, Vincent." A new voice cut through the night air, cultured and commanding. "Step away from them. Everyone turned to see a woman emerging from behind the shipping containers, flanked by federal agents in tactical gear. She was in her 60s, silver-haired and elegant, carrying herself with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Judge Patricia Morgan. Agent Rodriguez's voice crackled through hidden speakers. Federal prosecutors are standing by for your arrest, Mr. Caruso. Caruso's face shifted from confusion to rage. Who the hell are you? I'm the federal judge who signed Victoria Sterling's warrant to investigate your money laundering operation. Judge Morgan replied calmly. I'm also the one she trusted with the complete evidence of your crimes. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. You're the friend who's been texting us. Victoria came to me 6 weeks before her death, terrified but determined. She'd uncovered connections between your organization and several federal contract frauds. I helped her gather admissible evidence and prepare sealed indictments. Impossible. Caruso snarled. Morrison said she was working alone. Morrison never knew about me. Victoria was too smart to trust a single source. Judge Morgan smiled coldly. The evidence you've been so desperate to find? It's been in federal custody for over a year, waiting for the right moment to surface. Richard stared at the judge. Then the evidence we found was Victoria's insurance policy. She knew if something happened to her, you'd eventually find those documents and they'd lead you to discover the truth. But the real evidence, the recordings, the financial transactions, the witness statements, has been safely locked away in federal court. Caruso was backing toward his vehicle, his associates' guns now trained on the encroaching federal agents. This isn't over. You have no idea how deep this goes. Actually, we do. Judge Morgan held up a thick folder. 17 federal agencies, 43 individuals, and 12 corporations are being raided simultaneously as we speak. Your network is finished, Vincent. The next few minutes were chaos. Gunfire erupted as Caruso's men tried to fight their way to freedom, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Sarah threw herself over her father, protecting him from ricocheting bullets, while Richard shielded them both. When the shooting stopped, Caruso lay wounded but alive, cursing in multiple languages. As federal agents read him his rights, his associates were either dead or in custody. Is it over? Sarah asked Agent Rodriguez as paramedics checked her father's condition. This part is. But Sarah, there's something else you need to know. Rodriguez's expression was carefully neutral. The safe house, it was never just about protecting you. Judge Morgan needed time to coordinate international arrests. You two were unknowing participants in a federal sting operation. Richard looked stunned. We were bait. You were heroes, Judge Morgan corrected, approaching them. Victoria's evidence was always going to surface eventually, but your discovery of it, your willingness to fight back, that gave us the momentum. We needed to move against the entire network. Sarah helped her father to his feet, noting that his color was good despite everything he'd endured. Baba, are you okay? I'm proud of you, daughter, James Chen said in Mandarin. You finished what Victoria Sterling started. She would be proud too. As federal agents secured the scene and paramedics cleared James for release, Sarah found herself standing next to Richard at the edge of the pier, watching city lights reflect off the dark water. So what now? She asked quietly. Now we figure out who we are when we're not running for our lives. Richard replied. Think we can manage that? Sarah smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. I think Victoria would want us to try. Behind them. Judge Morgan was explaining to Agent Rodriguez how Victoria Sterling had spent her final months building an unshakable case against corruption that reached into the highest levels of city government. The investigation Victoria died for would ultimately expose a network responsible for dozens of deaths and millions in stolen public funds. But for Sarah and Richard, standing together as dawn began to break over Brooklyn Harbor, the most important truth was simpler. They had survived, justice would be served, and the future Victoria had planned for them was finally theirs to discover. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the renovated nursery of the Sterling mansion, painting the walls a soft yellow that caught the spring sunlight streaming through clean windows. The room that had been frozen in time for almost 2 years was finally becoming something new. Perfect color, Richard said from the doorway, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing paint-splattered jeans. That would have horrified his corporate wardrobe consultant. Victoria would have liked it, Sarah replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Neutral enough for any baby, but warm and hopeful. They'd found Victoria's original nursery plans in her desk 3 months ago, along with a letter addressed to the woman who helps Richard live again. In it, Victoria had written about her dreams for this room, her hopes for the children they might never have, and her wish that someday the space would be filled with laughter instead of longing. The adoption agency called this morning, Richard said, sitting on the window seat they'd installed the previous week. The Matthews family, Jennifer and Tom, they want to meet us next week. Sarah's heart raced with nervous excitement. Really, they're interested, very interested. Apparently, our story impressed them. A widowed CEO and his wife who met through tragedy, but chose to build something beautiful together. They'd married quietly in January, with only Sarah's parents and Agent Rodriguez as witnesses. Judge Morgan had performed the ceremony in her chambers, calling it the most hopeful ending to a federal case she'd ever seen. The media had briefly picked up the story, cleaning lady to CEO's wife, a modern Cinderella tale. But public interest faded when bigger scandals emerged. Sterling Industries had emerged from the federal investigation, stronger than ever. Richard's cooperation with authorities and his decision to implement unprecedented transparency measures had actually increased investor confidence. The Shanghai office was expanding, and Sarah's role as Director of International Operations kept her traveling between New York and Hong Kong several weeks each month. I got the test results back, Sarah said, settling next to Richard on the window seat. Dr. Morrison says there's no medical reason we can't have children of our own. My fertility is completely normal. But, Richard sensed her hesitation. But, I keep thinking about what Victoria wrote in her letter, about how love multiplies when you share it with children who need homes. Sarah looked around the sunny nursery. There are so many kids who need families, Richard. Maybe our path to parenthood was always meant to be different. Richard took her hand, his wedding ring catching the light. I love you for that perspective. And honestly, after everything we've been through, adoption feels right. Like we're choosing hope over biology, love over genetics. Victoria would approve. Victoria would be ecstatic. Remember, she was the one who spent months researching international adoption procedures. We found all her notes in her office safe. Sarah laughed, though tears threatened. She really did plan everything, didn't she? Even from beyond the grave, she's still matchmaking. Not everything, Richard said seriously. She couldn't plan this. He gestured between them, encompassing their obvious happiness, the comfortable intimacy they'd built. She could arrange our meeting, but she couldn't make us fall in love. That was all us. A knock at the door interrupted them. James Chen appeared in the hallway, looking healthier than he had in years. His heart surgery had been completely successful, and he'd recently started dating a nurse from the cardiac unit, much to Sarah's amused delight. Sorry to interrupt, James said in English that had improved dramatically over the months. But there's someone here to see you. Says she's from the Victoria Sterling Foundation. Sarah and Richard exchanged puzzled looks. They'd established the foundation 6 months ago to support immigrant families facing financial crises, but they weren't expecting any representatives today. Downstairs, they found a young woman in her 20s, professionally dressed but with kind eyes that reminded Sarah of Victoria's photos. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, I'm Rebecca Martinez from the foundation. I wanted to thank you personally. Your organization just saved my family. What happened? Sarah asked, inviting Rebecca to sit in the living room. My mother was diagnosed with cancer 3 months ago. We're undocumented, so insurance was impossible. The medical bills were crushing us, and then these men came to our apartment. They said they could lend us money, but the terms, Rebecca shuddered. It was exactly what happened to your family, Mrs. Sterling. The same predatory lenders, the same threats. Richard leaned forward intently. But the foundation helped more than helped. You paid for my mother's treatment directly, and when those men came back, your security team was ready for them. Turns out they were still operating even after the arrests, using different names, but the same tactics. Sarah felt a familiar chill. Are they in custody now, all of them? Agent Rodriguez said they'll be prosecuted under the new anti-predatory lending laws. That passed after the Morrison scandal. Rebecca smiled through tears. My mother starts recovery next week. Her doctors say the prognosis is excellent. After Rebecca left, Sarah and Richard stood together in the foyer, looking at the fresh flowers that now filled Victoria's crystal vase. Orange tulips instead of white roses. Bright and alive rather than memorial. She's still saving families. Sarah said softly, even now, we're still saving families, Richard corrected. Victoria started something, but we're the ones keeping it going. That evening, as they prepared for bed in the master's suite they'd finally reclaimed from grief, Sarah found Richard standing at Victoria's vanity, looking at a framed photo of all three of them taken at last Christmas. Victoria's parents had visited, and Richard's sister had come from California. And somehow Sarah had become part of a family she'd never expected to have. Do you think she knows, Richard asked quietly, about us, about the foundation, about the nursery? Sarah considered the question seriously. I think she knew when she made her plan that the best way to honor someone's memory is to live fully in the present they helped create. I love you, Sarah Sterling, Richard said, using her married name with the same wonder he'd shown 6 months ago. I love you too, Richard Sterling, and I think our story is just beginning. Outside their window, spring rain began falling gently on the garden Victoria had planted and Sarah now tended. In the nursery upstairs, yellow paint dried on walls that would soon witness the laughter of children brought together by love rather than biology. And in a desk drawer, Victoria's final letter remained unread, the one marked for Richard and Sarah's first child, waiting for its moment to reveal the last gift. A remarkable woman had planned for the family she'd never meet, but had helped create. Some love stories end with death, others begin with it. The Sterling mansion, once a mausoleum to what was lost, had become a monument to what was possible when grief transforms into grace, and strangers become family through the mysterious alchemy of hope, time, and a dead woman's unwavering faith in the power of love to find a way.